So I can see we're down to the Keeners. This is great. So we're going to have our last panel discussion. So it's again bringing off what we talked about, about the presentations and climate change and adaptation. But also I think because it is the last panel discussion, last chance, is I think we want to also, as we said this morning, we'd like to really think, is there some action items that we want to bring as a group that we think we can either do, or at least, well, let's say simple things that we can do. And the example came up this morning as maybe a short summary of some of the environmental issues with the devastation of the community pastures. So something on the carbon, maybe something on the biodiversity, something short, something that might help some of the decision makers in that process recognize or be aware anyways of some of those concerns, but as well to be shortened, be available quickly. But that would be one example, maybe something that we could spearhead. And the other thing is my own particular thing is if there's anyone wanting to join a kind of an advisory working group to help us as we try to deal with this aspect of defining grassland types for the purposes, I say initially of greenhouse gas inventory, but obviously we'd like to see it. If we're going to do that work, it better be suitable for other purposes. And so, but if there's anyone wanting to be, again, kind of on an unofficial advisory to help us so that we don't make some stupid decisions, like essentially we made those other decisions, I guess, about what defined as grassland for the inventory without really a lot of input. I think we made some mistakes. So you can contact me if you are willing to serve on the advisory. Otherwise, I'll probably start contacting a few people here. So, because or maybe just a show of hands. Not that you're interested, but just that you think that's a good idea. That if we are going to develop a system of classification, it would be good to try to bring in other people. Or people think that's a crazy idea, that we've already got good systems. No one wants to put up their hand, of course. I can see that.
Which one are we raising our hand to? The first?
Well, maybe let's. The first one is: do you think it's a good idea to try to do the advisory, and then okay,
yeah. And
then the second one was I can't even remember now. I guess it was more or less what that there is a need for this. There would be a real need for that. We don't have an existing system that we can build on. Well, we have existing systems we can build on, but do we have a system that we say would be suitable already? Anyone has kind of in their own back of their mind. Okay, so we'll, Peggy.
I think you should scout around really carefully and see what there is there, because if you go into Environment Canada work, there's ecosystem classifications, and in Alberta they've done a lot of work moving from a range site concept into like an eco-range site concept. And so I think there's an awful lot of things out there that fit what it sounds like you're trying to do, and maybe you just have to add an extra variable into that system. So I think something exists that could be modified for your, or added, not modified, added to. I think we've done enough modification in the country where we've got a national approach and then we changed it for each province and then all kinds of interesting things.
Okay, who wants to give the first question, first comment?
I'd like to direct, I guess, a question or comment directly to Dwayne, because he seems to be so astute about the land and how to manage and this sort of thing. But you're a fair bit north in the black soil zone, I understand. And I'm just wondering what, or if you had several sections of, grassland in the brown soil zone, what kind of things would you be looking at in terms of management on the grassland, and for active, improved productivity, this sort of thing? Do you have any thoughts and ideas on a drier grassland situation?
Well, yeah, we're half an hour north of Fort Capel, so north of the Capel Valley, and it is the black sandy loam. Through holistic management, talking with Alan Savory in person, and hearing his presentations and kind of following that and watching what they've done. One picture, one slide that I've seen put up in those presentations in particular was in New Mexico, and it was a fence line where they practiced density grazing on one side and typical extensive grazing on the other side, which has been happening for hundreds of years. And the grass was like this on the density grazing side, and it was desert on the other side. And that really caught my attention. And I talked to Lyle Stewart just the other day. I phoned him for a quick question and it turned into an hour-and-a-half conversation. Lyle's down at Rock Glen, and he has started density grazing in a pretty, a much harsher system than we are, because we can manage things and Mother Nature covers up our mistakes pretty quick. But down there, they can run into some trouble. Now, they've had a lot of moisture this year, but he's seeing the same thing down there where they're density grazing. They're not doing the hourly rotations, but they are doing fairly just within a couple, 2-3 days, and he's seeing fantastic results. And it's a lot of, part of wanting to be a cowboy is wanting to be maybe a little lazy too. So it's not the case you've got to be out. You do have to be out. You have to figure out a system, a rotation system. In that being said, I've figured out how not to have to be out fencing all the time, because I just had 4 kids to do it. But we have set up our paddocks so that we don't have to be moving fences, because nobody wants to be doing that all summer long. But it has huge rewards. The density grazing, number one, I think has a lot of potential.
I have 2 questions concerning the condition of Canadian grassland. The first one is, what reasons cause the high dead materials in Canadian grassland? And the second one is, what the historical trend of the dead materials variation in Canadian grassland?
Well, I think it depends quite a bit on management. If you see grasslands that have a lot of dead material, it's because people have left carryover from the previous season. And if everything was eaten in the previous season, leaving no carryover, you wouldn't see all that dead material. So I think it's something that varies quite a bit with management. And so I suppose there's been a lot of people pushing this idea that we should leave carryover and build up some of that litter, and that's why we're seeing so much nowadays, is because of range scientists saying people should do that. So does that make sense to you, Dwayne?
Comment I might make on that. It's also a factor of extensive grazing too, and understocking, and I know there'd be a lot of people in the crowd that would think there's no such thing as over-resting, but I believe there is. And I think having too much, letting something over-rest and building up all that over old material without the cloven hoof impact, and getting it tramped down to become litter and to become organic matter and get the bioactivity going in the soil. Yeah, I believe there is under-resting, or over-resting.
I can see why you ask this question, because if you look at the grassland in the Mongolia, utilization is much more than what we have here. So probably for most of the grasslands here, the first impression you have is a lot of dead materials. Like Dwayne said, how much is too much? Jim Romo and I are conducting a project looking at later on productivity, and Eric is also working on this one, looking at different processes. So eventually, we want to find out optimal level of later that can be beneficial, but we don't want to leave too much. That means underutilization.
Is it related with the climate change? I mean, climate change can affect the grass growth. That can cause, for example, the drought can cause the grass die.
Well, yeah, if it's dry, then definitely you will see more brown color in the grass and less green. But it's a general rule, utilization, the degree of utilization probably cause the difference between the grasslands here and the grassland in Mongolia.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dan Shu from Department of Geography and Planning, US. Actually, it's a good leading to my question about the dead materials. I want to ask a question about grazing management. Actually, the low intensity of grazing will encourage the grass growth, and the heavy intensity of grazing will make the grassland degradation. It seems like there is a threshold between the low grazing intensity and the heavy grazing intensity. So I would like to ask how to decide how many livestock should include in a certain prairie area. Thank you.
In our system, I aim to be moving the cows at least about every 3 to 5 days is my optimum. So I find it hard to put number of head to number of acres because of the variability, but just through trial and error and experience, I find that right now I know that I've worked my way up to where we're at with the 900 odd head on 80 acres, and I know that under the growth conditions we're under right now, we are going to have about 3 to 4 days on an 80 acre paddock at home. And that being said, we're in the first rotation, we're going to tramp almost as much as we eat. And to me, that's just putting money in the bank. By tramping, trying either defecate on it, tramp it, or eat it, and then move on. And I think that's just kind of, for me, that's been a trial and error thing. I have never done any math or anything on that, but in our situation, on 80 acres, that's where we're at.
So how long would it be till they come back again to that?
My goal is 60 days, yeah. And then I get a really nice regrowth, and I also get seed production, where when they do trap it the next time, we get some more seed production.
Wait, is that seeded forage?
That's right. I do have some native forage, basically small areas within fields. I do have 1/4 section that is predominantly native, but for the most part, it's former farmland, and it becomes farmland again at some point.
You were talking about leaving prairie fragments to create a corridor for seeds to come in. And I'm just wondering if there's anything known about how close those fragments have to be to have effective use of those fragments as a corridor. Anything known about the distance that seeds can travel in order to create a new community?
Yeah, well, I've seen a couple of papers about that, and it sounds like pretty close. You know, like from what I can tell, if you've got some of these, you know, long-lived perennial grasses, they actually move pretty slowly. You know, and so yeah, I don't know exactly how far, but I think if you have much of a gap at all, it's an extremely slow process for you know, those kind of grasses to make the jump to the next patch. So and that's one of the issues with this whole idea of trying to build corridors. Is some people say, well, you could never build enough corridor. You know, it'd be such a slow process. So so yeah, on the other hand, you've got weedy species that can make the jump. They can go 100 miles in a day. You know, so it's the difference in dispersal ability. You know, so.
I have a different question, but I just wanted to add to that, and Jeff's familiar with this one in forestry, that, you know, if you drop a white spruce seedling from the top of the crown, it goes a little ways in the summer, and Ed Johnson's done work on how far and stuff. But if it falls on the snow in the winter and blows in the wind, it can go a heck of a lot farther. And so, you know, some prairies, it'd be interesting to put that into the mix if you modeled it. If they were just, you know, a grass was to hold on to some of its spikelets and then have them blow across the hard snow in the winter, they might go many orders of magnitude farther. But that doesn't change the fact that, and here's my question, that for the understanding of the conservation of biodiversity on the Canadian Great Plains, and maybe somebody's done this, but I'd like to see a group of people look at what a sufficient network of native grasslands is. Its dimensions in terms of its area and the distribution of different patch sizes and potential corridors, and you know, develop some scenarios about what's really needed to sustain biodiversity now, and then under different scenarios of climate change. I think that would be really valuable because it would set the bounds of what might be possible. And so I know that's a statement, but the question is, could it be done with the existing data, with the GIS tools we've got? Is there any reason why that couldn't be done?
Yeah, I think as far as the GIS, yeah, it could be done that way. I think probably the bigger issue is all these different species and actually having some data about how about their requirements. You know, I think that we would need more biologists out there measuring this stuff. You know, and of course there's hundreds of critter, you know, plants, animals, microbes, and so on that you know, we probably don't know enough about. So I think that'd be the limiting factor. Yeah.
Could you start though now with what we've got?
Sure, I'll start tomorrow, Robin.
That's what we want to hear, actually.
I think Environment Canada should help.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were offering me money, Robin.
This question may not relate specifically to climate change and so on, but I think from my perspective, anytime we're talking about agriculture and the future of agriculture, the elephant in the room is bioeconomy, biofuel and so on. And I'm just wondering whether I could get some comments about the potential impact of a market for cellulose, which is really what the bioeconomy is all about, or biofuel for cellulosic ethanol, what that impact that might have in producing an alternative market for cellulose other than beef. Really, that's the only market currently for cellulose, and if that becomes a significant market, what's that going to do to the grasslands? I can see it as a tremendous threat to our grasslands when we start putting in grasses, you know, non-native grass into this land that's marginal for crops, but may produce grass reasonably well to make a product for a biofuel market. I just wondered whether we could get some comments or ideas, thoughts?
That's certainly a thought, and it's not one that I've considered. The one that I have considered is right on our own place. When you start netting $600 an acre for canola, or you know, the calf markets come up, but not relative to that dollars per acre, and so then there's no better place to grow grass than sort of half marginal farmland. And I wouldn't say that we're on half marginal, we're on sort of parkland, regular black farmland, but it's not the straight up and back stuff. And I think you're right. Yeah, if there becomes a market to grow grass with reasonably low input and reasonably low iron input, it could be a definite, it would be a threat to both the cattle industry and the native marginal land that's growing regular forage. But it's not one I'd considered.
I have two unrelated questions for you. I remember last endangered species and conservation conference, a speaker, actually he's a rancher, he talked about the endangered species, and now is a rancher, actually. So I don't know, can you comment on that? The second question is, I can feel your passion for the land, for your herd, for your family. Do you have any frustration, especially with 4 children at a teenage age?
Sorry, but do I have any what?
Frustration.
That's why I keep my hair short so I can't pull it. It was interesting. I was just speaking with a girl that I was in the first year degree with me. She has since left, and we both had teenage boys. And I've decided that though I think as males we don't remember this, and it must be a hormonal thing, we don't remember it, but when you hit 13 years old, you're about at your smartest of your teenage years, and then as your body grows, your brain shrinks for a while, and then it kind of gets bigger when you hit about 25 and you realize your dad's not so dumb anymore. So I've got a 20-year-old and I've got a 14-year-old, so I'm at both ends of the spectrum on that. And my girls have been quite a lot easier. You know, when I came back in the late 80s to do what I wanted to do and to work into the operation, I distinctly remember our vet saying to me, why are you here? What are you doing? I know I was very capable with my hands. I was a good operator of equipment. There was all kinds of opportunity in other places, and I was there because I loved it. But I was also there because I was told by people who were real open-minded people that the opportunity where I was huge. And it was just so big, but it was such a big picture. That was 25 years ago. And looking ahead 25 years looks very ominous. Looking back, well, you wonder where it went. You're right, there are so many people getting out of this industry, and our cow herd has decreased significantly. Our commodities are higher price. I know very well that when the lady goes shopping for meat, and we were, you know, very, very seldom do I buy meat. But when I do, I go, whoa, that's expensive. And I'm the one reaping the benefits, so I understand that. It's probably not going to change a lot. The PFRA pasture system potentially going up for sale is a real concern to me. Though I don't use it, I have used it, I was employed by it. I'm very concerned that large, deep pockets outfits of them buying it. I know very well that a lot of 100-head cow herds utilize it extensively. If that should happen, we're going to see a lot more small cow herds, the 300 and down, disappear. It is going to happen, I guarantee you. So that's a very big concern to me, and you're right, we will be more of an endangered species.
Do you think other producers feel the same way as what you just said?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
From the producers I've spoken to, it's a very big concern. And because we've seen large outfits come in, and when the price of land, I mean, our land ownership laws have changed in Saskatchewan. We've got people with large amounts of money coming in, buying up large tracts of land. The price of land in our area has doubled and tripled. Fortunately, I was able to put our package together in the previous 25 years. It's made us that if something comes available, we probably could buy it and be competitive. But when, put it this way, I bought most of our land for $35,000 to $45,000 a quarter. Now, if somebody bought that for that price and wanted a 10% return or a 5% return, I can afford that rent. But if somebody buys it for $100,000 to $200,000 a quarter and wants 5 to 10% return, I can't afford it. And quite frankly, even in a really, like, we've got a very efficient system. We make money in our system. I know that I can make our land work. I can't pay $100 an acre for rent of land. It's not going to happen. So the land ownership really concerns me. The PM4 system really concerns me. And it is negative to an industry that is high labor, that typically has people in it who are very capable of doing other things that pay a lot more money.
I was just going to comment about the land being sold. I had an experience when I was a professor at Utah State University where a piece of land came up for sale. It was some beautiful land down in the bottomlands, and all the locals went to the auction to make a bid on it, and there was one bid made and everyone went home. It was so high that they couldn't even touch it, and it was someone who was not even from the United States, who made a lot of money in the oil industry, who bought it. So I have a feeling you'll find out that a lot of Canadians won't be buying that land.
Just one more comment. When that happens too, when corporations and outside outfits buy land, when my guy that I went to school with, who has a smaller operation, who is sustainable, but he sees the money on the oil rigs, and I'm talking about a real guy here that I know, and is happening this year. He ran 100 cows or whatever, farmed his land, and he thought, well, I'm just going to go and try the oil rigs. Now, if somebody buys him, he is not coming back. His son's not coming back, and our landscape has changed. So when agribusiness comes in and buys up this big tracts of land and farms it, and in a lot of cases it's not farmed very well, and when they fail, which they have in the past, when or if, or whatever you say, when they go or if they go, our nucleus is gone.
And it may not be an agribusiness that's even buying it.
Yeah.
The person that bought this land was from Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Any more? Oh, good.
I'm just wondering if there are any laws or any ways to limit or to put covenants on the land if it does go for sale. I mean, the thought of the last remaining native prairie in Canada going for sale to people who maybe have the third generation values that a lot of ranchers have, or the values that PM4 managers have. Are there any ways to protect it in perpetuity?
There used to be. But that was changed. And I was on a couple of boards and I argued passionately that when you're in my position of hoping to expand and hoping to create an environment for my children to, and it's reality that we have to get bigger, and some people who would say, well, you're too big already, why would you want to get bigger? Well, if we're going to keep making a life for our children, because everybody compares it to, can I have a lifestyle compared to my brother who is doing something else? So I've had to increase our place in order to have that lifestyle. And I argued passionately that, you know, we've got to have some control, that we don't have just a whole bunch of foreign ownership with absentee landowners. And the people who argued against me were people selling their land. So you can't fault them for wanting the most out of their land possible, but it's not helping rural Saskatchewan.
Dwayne, is there a 100-acre limit for foreign ownership?
Sorry,
The foreign ownership of land, is there a 100-acre limit?
no. The foreign ownership of land, I don't know all the ins and outs of it. There used to be some arguments at that time, like I just referred to, when there was somebody just in Manitoba that, you know, they couldn't farm just into Saskatchewan, and, you know, there used to be some foreign ownership laws, and there still are some, but they've relaxed to the point that we've got huge investment outfits buying land at a rampant rate in our area.
They don't necessarily represent themselves as being foreign when they have a middleman come in and buy it for them usually.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was part of an element of that question, but for the PFRA pastures, for instance, the provincial government could decide, and this is entirely up to the provincial government, to require that any piece of land that is sold out of the PFRA pasture system have an environmental easement on it, and require that that land not be broken or any kind of limitation on its land use. Now, there's always a question of monitoring that, but that certainly can be done. During the WAPA controversy, a lot of land in the WAPA system was, after some modeling was done, was considered to be land that shouldn't be sold. That's Wildlife Habitat Protection Act land, so about 7 million acres in Saskatchewan. A big chunk in the middle was land that should be sold only with a conservation easement, and a pretty small minority, I think it was 7% or under, was land that could just be sold with no control on it. So that was a recent decision made by the government of Saskatchewan about the sale of land. So it's entirely possible that the province can decide, but they need pressure. Because there's no pressure for conservation easements, then agriculture's perspective would be to sell the land and let the private landowner decide what his best use is, I would think. But I don't want to speak for agriculture, but that could be the perspective. So pressure is important.
It seems to be a theme here. Yeah. Well, I think with that, then we'll call this panel to close, and thanks everyone, panel for